Hello everyone, welcome back to another list video, and in this one we're gonna talk about the 25 most disappointing releases of 2023. It's another one of those years where you get those albums in which you have high expectations, or at least you expect something great about them, but they end up not delivering at the end of the day. Still, some of them I do recommend them to you since they might be more to your liking, but I personally couldn't really get into them. So, with that being said, here are the 25 albums that I felt were, for me, the most disappointing out of this year. Now, at number 25 is Mac DeMarco's 5 Easy Hot Dogs. I've personally liked Mac DeMarco's music over the years, but this might be my least favorite work he's put out. A bunch of short songs that sound unfinished, half-baked ideas, and just instrumentals. It feels like a bunch of demos. It's quite unengaging and boring. Next up at number 24 is Fanu with classic Coffee Cuts. Drum and bass and breakbeat producer just makes a bunch of breaks that sound fine but don't really lead to anything. It mostly feels like a library of beats and sounds being put together. It's decent but gets boring pretty fast. Number 23 is the new Ken Mod album, Void, a sequel to the amazing Null from the previous year, and that's also a quite decent album, but it feels more like a watered down version of Null. It's more of the same and a bit rushed, not as impactful but still an enjoyable listen. Number 22 is Evolve by Sub Focus. Outside of the amazing introduction, which made the project look really promising, the rest of the album is pretty standard dance floor drum and bass that is not all that memorable. Sub Focus started with some phenomenal stuff, but the more recent material end up feeling a little bit dated at this point. Number 21 is Chrysalis by Xanias. Zoe Xanias is one half of Linnea Spera, a great recent synth-pop duo, and I've tried to get into her solo stuff that go into a more dark wave direction, but unfortunately I haven't been all that impressed, especially with her latest album Over Here, which sounds really average. Her vocals are once again great, but the instrumentals and the songwriting leave a lot to be desired. At number 20 is the second Sightless Beat album Lockstep Blood War. The debut was such a promising release considering the collaborations, but didn't get that much mentioned. With the departure of Christian Hayter, the second album only consists of Lee Bufford from The Body and Dylan Walker from Full of Hell. The new album is filled with collaborations, and some of them really unexpected, but the album is a post-industrial mess, from power electronics to industrial hip-hop. Unfortunately, the features don't bring that much to the table, in a promising set of ideas that could have been executed better in my opinion. Number 19 is Baby Metal's fourth album, The Other One. I personally love the first two Baby Metal albums. The third one was a massive disappointment in my opinion, but the fourth is definitely better. I'd say that this is the most mature album they've put out, and it is a concept album. The general directions are more cohesive than ever before, but for me the appeal of Baby Metal came down to the absurdity and the wackiness of the first two albums, and even the third in some respects, because at the end of the day, this feels more like your average alternative metal album, which sounds good, but didn't really have something to make it stand out in my opinion. Number 18 is the new Suffocation album, Hands of the Apocrypha. It's a pretty standard direction of technical death metal in which they sound fine, like the album is decent, but it's not like I got to it with high expectations. It's mostly just for the hardcore fans, I'd say. At number 17, Drew Daniel of Matmos and the Soft Pink Truth fame collaborates for the second time with noise producer John Wiz to create an extremely short album that leaves a lot to be desired. It's mostly a bunch of experimentations being thrown together that sound nice, but the outcome never feels all that satisfying. There was potential for more, and I don't think we get that for the second time. Number 16, I know that this is going to be a hot take, but I thought the new Caroline Polachek album was mediocre. I liked her debut, I wasn't crazy about it though, and this new album had some pretty cool ideas to it that I enjoyed, and I like how dense and varied this album is. However, some of the directions didn't really work all that well in my opinion, and at the end of the day it felt more of like a promising album in which some of the tracks could have been executed differently. Number 15, I have the new Cryptopsy album, a band for which I don't care about their works at this point. This is a very typical and generic technical death metal album with nothing memorable about it. Number 14 is Wada with their new album, another band I don't care for at all at this point. Every new release they put out sounds more and more uninteresting, and this is such a blunt formula of melodic black metal. Don't even bother with this one. At number 13 is Action Adventure by DJ Shadow. It's crazy to see how such a beloved artist has gone downhill with their new releases, and it's not like I expect from DJ Shadow to drop something like Introducing again, but can we at least get an electronic album that doesn't sound so empty and shallow? The electronics and synths and beats, all of them sound really bland, and it's just a mediocre album overall. Number 12 is Purge by Godflesh. Even though this is meant to be a return to form, I really couldn't get into this at all. It sounds so monotone, so empty, and while characteristics like that can be appealing for a heavy industrial metal album, I can't say that was really the case over here. Number 11 is DJ Sickles, a new moniker of filmmaker with the album Instrumentals, a funk type album which kinda sucks. Like it's short with more of like a demo quality to it, didn't really get into it with high expectations, but this was certainly worse than expected. Getting to the top 10, at number 10 we have In Time's New Roman by Queens of the Stone Age, a band that for me has done some of my favorite records ever, is now back with another work that I'd say is pretty disappointing. I'm fine with a slight departure from stoner rock, but this sounds as unengaging as Villains, and I might even say I prefer Villains over this. It's an okay album, but I don't see me returning to it anytime soon. Number 9 is The Age of Pleasure by Janelle Monáe. Not that I was necessarily anticipating that release, but there are elements that I could potentially enjoy, from its attitude to its styles to how expressive it is, but the album just sounds bland and average overall. I was honestly expecting a bit more. Number 8 is Portals by Melanie Martinez, who seems like she's going full Björk on this one. Could have been more promising with its more mature approaches, at least musically, but that's not really the case. Bizarre pop directions, but not really in a good way, another weak lyrically project, and just a bit of a mess, suffering from an identity crisis. Yeah, this is extremely mediocre. At number 7, you mean to tell me that we waited all of those years for Gendo Ikari to drop an album only to make such an uninteresting technical grindcore debut? Yeah, this is not really all that good. At number 6, unfortunately, is the new Susu album, Ignore Grief, which I liked and it was pretty interesting, but considering the concept and how much I generally like Susu, this is not one of their strongest outputs. It makes a decent job on creating a disturbing and horrifying atmosphere, but past releases have evoked those types of feelings in a more gratifying fashion in my opinion. Returning to it, it wasn't that much of a grower. It's a very intriguing listen, but it doesn't really go beyond just being intriguing. Number 5 is Cracker Island by Gorillaz, which outside the self-titled song that starts the album in a strong note, the rest of it is kinda bland and not really all that engaging. Another recent Gorillaz album that didn't manage to click with me when it comes to its features or its genre blends, unfortunately. Number 4 is the new output of Yamazaki Maso as Control Death with Holy Evil Sister. Released on Deathbed Tapes, in which we've seen other Control Death works as well, this might be his worst project so far. It's really an interesting drone music that sounds extremely similar with pretty much anything else he's done with a project recently, and it's more just like background noise rather than anything else, so skip this one, it's not really worth your time. Number 3, unfortunately, is the new Danny Brown album, Quaranta. Considering how much I love Scaring the Host that came out the same year, and how much I like anything I've heard from Danny Brown so far, I had high expectations for this album, but outside of a couple interesting instrumentals and more personal and serious lyrical themes, this album didn't do it for me. It didn't click with me, even though it contains many elements that would make it an appealing Danny Brown release, but for whatever reason, I thought it was kinda forgettable and uninteresting. Number 2 is the underwhelming split of Full of Hell and Cusp. I could also put the collaborating project with Primitive Man, which was also disappointing in my opinion, but this release in particular sounds rushed, with a lot of empty drone space where not really a lot is happening, only to be interrupted by some decent sludge metal parts that are pretty short. The Cusp side tries to make things a bit more interesting with the more avant-garde structures and spacey aesthetics, but the overall sound and ideas are not all that great, so yeah, this feels more of like a couple of ideas being thrown together and nothing sticks, unfortunately. And at number 1, the most disappointing album of 2023 is the collaboration between Lucas Abela and Zach Hill. Lucas Abela is mostly known for his Justice Yeltham project where he would create noise out of blowing pieces of glass attached to contact mics and multiple effects. Really cool stuff. Zach Hill is mostly known as the ferocious drummer of Death Grips. This by itself is not a surprise, we've seen those two worlds colliding together, and it would be awesome to get an album where we'd listen to some intense noise textures accompanied with the furious improvised drumming of Zach Hill, which is what we actually get with this album, but for some reason they decided to ruin it by making the drumming have the role of sequencing a envelope generator, so when they play they trigger and chain effects that get adjusted on the modular system, making the drumming and the glass noise get covered in weird experimental effects when played. If you don't understand what this means, you can understand listening to it, and tell me if this sounds appealing to you. How much cooler would it be if this exact same project was done raw, with the original recording feeling like a self-improvised mayhem of noise, because you can tell that there's some insane drumming here, but it's being buried, just like the glass noise, with all of those goofy modular effects and textures, which by the way they're the exact same for each of the songs. This is a great example of an album that did much more than needed and ruined what feels like it's a great recording from an exciting collaboration. It's a shame, honestly. And that's all for the most disappointing albums of 2023. What were the albums that disappointed you the most out of this year? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.